So it's a pretty common occurrence. A new update comes out, you immediately download it and jump onto the servers and load up one of the new attack defend maps. Payload good map. Payload good map, yeah. Excited to finally get to try it out, having heard it was a pretty good map. You play your first round on defense and it goes pretty poorly. You were constantly being flanked, none of your engineers could find a place to build, you get destroyed, you didn't stand a chance. You're surprised, but write it off as a fluke. Round 2 goes by and your team does the exact same thing. Absolutely steamrolls the defenders, they never had a chance. You dip out and decide to try some other maps. They don't seem that great either, honestly. The next day, you catch a video about a really obvious exploit on Payload Good Map that lets players out of bounds and under the map. Engineers are building teleporters and spamming sentries underground. It's a disaster. You're starting to suspect Payload Good Map is not such a good map. How could this have ever gotten through testing? What was the mapper thinking releasing such a bad map? How could they have not seen this coming? As someone who's gone through the cycle of developing a map, extensively testing it to the best of my ability, iterating dozens of times and testing often hundreds of rounds, only to arguably release my own bad maps that have made it into the game, I'd like to talk to you about why this happens and what you could potentially do about it. First and foremost, let's talk about how maps get tested. Almost every map that gets included into TF2 these days is tested on TF2maps.net. TF2 Maps has been around since the start of TF2 and has always been there for custom mappers to host and get their work critiqued. It's a very welcoming community of all skill levels, from novice mappers dropping their Koth first map A1 to seasoned veterans who've been on the scene over a decade creating projects with a team of asset creators. Those old, ancient, grizzled bastards. Super old and gnarled, being elderly. One of the services TF2 Maps provides is near-daily custom map testing for anyone who wants to throw their map into the running. On the server itself, players can leave feedback directly on the map, which logs and notes possibly even the location the player was standing and looking in when they left it, if they choose to do so. It's an incredibly valuable tool for custom mappers that, frankly, a lot of other games modding communities are severely missing out on. As of recording this video, the bot that handles the queue of maps getting tested is at nearly 50 different maps. Despite the daily, if not multiple tests a day, there's always a ton of maps being created and needing testing. It's honestly a testament to not only the longevity of TF2, but the friendly environment that TF2 Maps provides for getting your maps tested. You've got a small handful of community servers that have active players and are willing to try work-in-progress maps, like the one I personally have been testing on for the last almost 14 years. Yes, the same one. But outside of that, it's pretty barren. Which therein lies the problem. When a map gets added to the game, it goes from having a player base of maybe a few hundred people over the course of a map's development, if they are lucky, to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people almost overnight. When there's that many eyes all looking at and playing your project at once, it's very likely someone is going to find an issue, and fast. Now imagine it from the mapper's perspective. Your map that you've sunk hundreds of hours into building, testing, iterating, polishing, and finally getting to release, and it even gets picked up by Valve and added to the game, the first few days of its inclusion are incredibly nerve-wracking. You can think you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, but something is very likely going to slip through. It happens. Valve contacts mappers generally a few weeks before an update, but it's really not that much time to polish too much up and submit to them. And then you're in the dark about when the update is actually going to drop. So you sort of end up being on call for this moment, waiting to see how things work out and if anything major needs fixing. When it does drop and things inevitably burst into flames, the mapper has to scramble to figure out the problem, implement a solution, and get it to Valve. But wait, something else popped up. How could you have possibly missed this one? It's so obvious. Did you even test this map? Then your update hits, and you realize in the rush to fix things, you forgot your clipping viz group, and the entire map is broken. Again. Not only do you have the community breathing down your neck about how you should have known and done better, but you also have to fess up to Valve that you made a classic mistake and had them push it to the game. But you know, this is just theoretical and definitely isn't something that has happened to anyone you know. Plus there's the issue from the player perspective that despite something popping up when you play a recently added map, you can't always rely on the mapper to see the same things, and the general community very rarely goes out of their way to provide feedback unless they're mad about something, and then usually it's often just anger and not that constructive. Good map, more like bad map, am I right? Ha, map sucks. Oftentimes, thousands of people will know about an issue, how to replicate it, and the cause of it, but not a single one of them will take the time to relay this to the mapper themselves, assuming someone else did, or that they're too hard to get a hold of. Combine that with certain YouTubers who benefit from withholding issues until they can monetize them for their own benefit, and very, very rarely go out of their way to make sure the mappers know about the issue, you kind of start seeing how getting something in can snowball for the mapper into going back into crunch time just to fix issues on the map that seemingly played perfectly fine in all the tests that came before this point. On top of that, all maps have learning curves, some more than others. Often in testing, a map will play one way for a long time until players learn it better, and then it will dramatically switch. Say a strong engineer hold will be found, or defenders learn how to keep an eye on that strong flank route. Suddenly, Payload Good Map is too hard to attack when initially it seemed like it was impossible to ever hold a strong defense on it. But then, unfortunately, usually after the first week or so, opinions on a map can get pretty locked in. Once you've had a bad few rounds that make the map feel imbalanced, or had somebody find an exploit and abuse it mercilessly at your own detriment, it's hard not to think the map is just plain bad. All of this is to say that this stuff is hard. Mappers are hobbyists. Very few community mappers are full-time level designers, and if they are, it's not for TF2. Usually maps are made for fun as a creative outlet and as a side thing to one's regular life and job. The hope is generally to see its inclusion in game, so don't get me wrong, that's always great to see and very affirming to someone who's been working hard on a project, but I think the community should try to understand that we're all in this stuff together. So, as a player, what can you do? First and foremost, you have a lot of power. Be open-minded when you first try out a new map. Give it time to breathe before making any decisions about the quality. If you find an issue, go out of your way to make sure the mapper knows about it. The Steam Workshop is usually a great place to do so. And ideally, maybe try not to be a jerk about it. Everyone is much more open to listen if you're starting out being reasonable. But even better is help test these maps before they get into the game and take the time to provide feedback. TF2 Maps is always looking for players to help fill the server, and the bigger variety in playtesters, the more likely issues will be found earlier. If it's only other mappers testing maps, you're only getting feedback from a mapper perspective. Joining the TF2 Maps Discord will get you notifications for when and where those tests are happening if you'd like to join. If you're a server owner, maybe think about regularly snagging some new maps and trying them out. Organize a day for it and make it an event. Save the demo files of the event and get them to the mapper. Encourage your players to leave feedback on the map. If you're part of a server community, go out of your way to suggest new maps and encourage events to the server owners to try them out. As is the case with map feedback, server owners won't know what you want unless you tell them. Also, just as a side note, it can sometimes be intimidating to leave feedback. You may have only gotten it tested a bit and don't have a full and complete thought about how something plays yet. That's very reasonable. That feedback is still, however, valuable. Describing how something feels to you as a player is always useful. It's up to the mappers to interpret that feedback and implement what is necessary, which is admittedly an entirely different skill that needs to be developed for the mapper, but that's a topic of another video. In conclusion, I hope this gives you a little insight into what can happen when a map gets in-game, and why things that may seem obvious shortly after they get included are often missed during development or not immediately addressed. As I said, we're all in this together, and we're all looking to make the best map that we can that is fun to play on. Fun is always going to be subjective, but the more perspectives we have working towards this goal, the better. As always, huge shout out to Agent Maxwell and Allison and all these other nerds you see on your screen, whose support provides a nice little chunk of affirming positive feedback that I'm doing something right here for somebody. If you'd like to join them in doing so, and get some behind the scenes of my current active projects before I show it off publicly, plus some other Discord server perks, it would mean a lot to me. My Discord server is also a great place to find out when I'm testing my own maps, if you'd like to be there on the ground floor development, see the process from start to completion, and get to help shape it with your play and feedback. I hope this video was insightful. Thanks for watching.